Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Today I'm going to be talking about the Dee Dee Blanchard case. This case is relatively recent and quite popular, I would say, so I wouldn't be surprised if you already know this. Dee Dee Blanchard was 48 at the time of this case, and she was unemployed, but she was working as a full-time carer for her daughter Gypsy. And Gypsy was 23 at the time of the case, but she had so many different illnesses and she was completely dependent on her mother. To name just a few of Gypsy's illnesses and different medical conditions, she had so many. She had muscular dystrophy, epilepsy, she had problems with her hearing and her sight. She at one point had leukemia. She had to use a feeding tube because she had digestive problems, and she had so much more. And because of her muscular dystrophy, she had to use a wheelchair. A lot of these problems are because Gypsy was born prematurely. So when she was born, she had a lot of damage to her brain, and it's said that she had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old. And because of this, doctors thought that she was going to have a very short lifespan. Dee Dee and Gypsy were Hurricane Katrina survivors. So in 2008, a charity called Habitat for Humanity built them a small home. The community around the Blanchards really wanted to help them, so they bought them things, they drove them everywhere they wanted to go. They just tried their best to help these people. They got free flights to see doctors in Kansas City. Gypsy, she loved Disney. She would watch Disney films all the time. And they even got free trips to Disney World. I think at some point they met Elijah Wood. They got backstage passes to singer Miranda Lambert concerts. They made a Make-A-Wish Foundation because of her leukemia, which made them be able to afford so many different things, as well as medication for Gypsy. When Gypsy was around the 2nd grade, Dee Dee took her out of school. I'm not sure if it was the 2nd grade or kindergarten, but most things I read said the 2nd grade, so I'm just gonna assume that it's that. But yeah, she took her out because it was just easier because she had so many different illnesses, and it was easier if her mom just taught her things at home, if you know what I mean. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Dee Dee herself now. Her real name was Claudine Blanchard. Claudine, such a nice name. She was born in Louisiana in 1965. When she was a kid, she got into a bit of trouble. She would steal things if things didn't go her way as a form of retaliation. She became a nurse's aide, and when Dee Dee's mother got sick, she would take care of her. It would be much later that her family got suspicious that Dee Dee may have been responsible for their mother's death. There isn't like any concrete evidence, but it's just that feeling, you know? It'll make sense later. They thought that Dee Dee was poisoning their mother or denying her food. It could be both, we're not sure. Of course, this isn't concrete evidence, as I said, so, just take it with a grain of salt. When Dee Dee was 24, she became pregnant by a man called Ron Blanchard, who was 17 at the time. And because they didn't want to have a baby while they weren't married, they got married, and they had a baby girl. Her name was Gypsy Rose Blanchard. However, shortly before Gypsy was even born, the couple separated. Ron said that he was just very unhappy and that he got married for all the wrong reasons. I'm sure he didn't want to even get married in the first place, but they did. And Dee Dee really wanted him to stay. She begged him to stay, but, he didn't want to get married. He didn't want to stay married. And the couple separated, and Dee Dee took Gypsy to go live with her parents. Dee Dee and Gypsy went to live with Dee Dee's father and stepmother, and during this time, her stepmother fell really ill. Her father and stepmother believed that Dee Dee would poison her stepmother's food, and they thought that she put weed killer in it. This led to her stepmother getting really sick, and she was bedridden, and her father really thought that she wasn't going to make it. So her father, Dee Dee, and her stepmother confronted Dee Dee about this, and they were like, hey, is this true, like what we're thinking? And Dee Dee got really offended by this, and she took Gypsy, and when she left, her stepmother miraculously just got better. When they moved, they lived in council housing, and they would pay their bills by money given by the government because Gypsy was so sick, and they would also use Ron's child support payments. During this time, Gypsy was always in and out of hospital all the time. She had so many different surgeries done on her. In 2015, Hurricane Katrina hit, and their home got destroyed, and because of the flooding, they had to relocate to Missouri. Because of the flooding, a lot of Gypsy's medical documents and even her birth certificate got lost or were damaged. So now, because of the hurricane, the two moved to a different state, and that's when all the charity work and donations that I talked about earlier started. Dee Dee told all their new neighbors that they were actually able to escape an abusive family, that her parents were abusive, as well as Ron, Gypsy's father. Ron would not pay his child support, and that they were able to escape an abusive home. So she said that her family were abusive, and as well as Ron. Which is just not true. Like, everything she was saying was a lie, and I don't know why. Did she want people to pity her? Like, I don't get why she was lying like that. And because of this, people felt really bad for them, and they were kind of famous. In 2010, police got a call, and this person was basically saying that they were worried about Dee Dee and Gypsy because they had a joint Facebook account, and in this account it had a status, and it said that the bitch is dead. And people were commenting. Most people thought that they got hacked because they were kind of famous, so it made sense. And some people thought that they were joking, but most people were very worried. Some of their friends and neighbors went to their house to see if they were home and if they were okay. And when they got there, they saw that Dee Dee's van was still there. This van was modified to fit Gypsy's wheelchair, so it's very unlikely that they just left to a hospital visit or something. So they knocked on the door and no one answered, and that made them more worried, and the curtains were all closed, so they couldn't even see inside. Police couldn't enter the house legally without a search warrant, so they allowed one of the neighbors to go inside and to just quickly have a search. And he went inside, but he couldn't search everything because all the doors were locked. And when he came back, he said that it seemed undisturbed. All of Gypsy's wheelchairs were there, but it just seemed like they just got up and left. Finally, around 11 p.m. that night, police got a search warrant and they were able to go inside the house. And there they saw Dee Dee Blanchard's body. And when police found the body, they realized that Dee Dee had been dead for a few days now, and Gypsy was nowhere to be found. A GoFundMe page was set up for Dee Dee's funeral as well as Gypsy. Even though Gypsy was still alive and she was considered a missing person, people just didn't think that she was still alive. Which I know sounds a bit grim, but it's the truth. I mean, she needed a feeding tube, she needed an oxygen tank, she needed so many different medications that it just didn't make sense that she would still be alive. And most people thought that she was just dead. A neighbor of Dee Dee and Gypsy told police that she knew that Gypsy had a secret online boyfriend that she met through a Christian singles dating site. His name was Nicholas. Police asked Facebook to trace the IP address of the post in Dee Dee's account, and it turned out to be in Wisconsin, and it did belong to this Nicholas guy. So when police went to his house, he surrendered immediately. But I think what was most surprising when police went to Nick's home was that Gypsy was actually with him. And she was not dead like most people thought she was. Gypsy was way, way less ill than people thought that she was. For starters, she could walk. Like, she could literally walk on her own. She didn't need any help. She didn't need any assistance. She was able to travel to a completely different state without an oxygen tank, without a feeding tube, literally nothing. None of her medications, nothing. Everyone was so shocked that they had been lied to this entire time. Her family, her friends, people who have donated to them, everyone was lied to, and everyone was so shocked. It was all just a big fat lie. She could walk, she could do everything. She didn't need any of these medications, and all of these lies were made up by Dee Dee. Doctors believe that Dee Dee Blanchard suffered from Munchausen by proxy, which is a mental illness. I think it is considered one, where a carer would make up an illness for the person that they are taking care of, which is exactly what happened in this case. Gypsy said that when she was in prison, I'll talk about her sentencing a bit later, she Googled, Gypsy, what Munchausen by proxy was, and she said that her mother matched all the symptoms. Dee Dee used to physically abuse and control her daughter. When they were out in public, Dee Dee would always hold Gypsy's hand, and Gypsy said that whenever she told people or she made it seem that she wasn't as sick as she seemed, Dee Dee would squeeze her hand really, really tight, and when they got home, Dee Dee would slap her and hit her. I mean, poor Gypsy, right? Oh my god. Gypsy was asked why didn't she just stand up when she was using the wheelchair, because she obviously didn't need one, and Dee Dee would be caught in a lie. And Gypsy basically explained that she thought that no one was going to believe her. And I know that sounds quite ridiculous, but this girl was abused for all her life, so maybe she could believe that. I don't know, it just sounds so... Like, why was she thinking that? Of course people are going to believe her. As we know, Dee Dee lied about all of Gypsy's illnesses, and she believed that all of them were true, Gypsy, except for the muscular dystrophy. She knew that wasn't true because she could walk. But everything else she thought was true. She thought that she had leukemia. She was taking all of the different medications. Gypsy, Dee Dee, sorry, she shaved off Gypsy's hair because she said it was going to fall off with the treatment. But it wasn't going to fall off because she didn't have cancer. When Gypsy was arrested, she told police that she was 19, and she believed this because her mother told her this so many different times, and she just believed the lie. But in reality, she was 23 years old. Now, Gypsy's father, Ron, he tried his best to be a good dad. He always tried to be in contact with her, and he always tried to meet her, but Dee Dee would never let him. On Gypsy's 18th birthday, Ron called Dee Dee because he wanted to, wish his daughter a happy birthday. And Dee Dee told him that it would be best if he didn't say her age because Gypsy thought that she was 14. Ron agreed to this because he didn't want to upset Gypsy, so he just played along, thinking that Gypsy had a much younger mental capacity. So let's go back and talk about Nicholas. I'm sorry this video is all over the place, I'm trying my best to explain it, but this case has so many different parts, and hopefully I'm explaining it in a decent way, and you're not just more confused, I hope. In 2012, Gypsy was using the internet. She was online. She wasn't allowed to use the internet, but at least without her mother's supervision, but she did it anyways when Dee Dee went to sleep, and she met a guy online, and his name was Nicholas. Nick had a few problems of his own. He had a criminal record for indecent exposure because he was masturbating in a McDonald's for 9 hours. 9 hours? Oh my god. This guy. Ooh. He also had a few mental illnesses, including multiple personality disorder, and he also had autism. Nick went to Springfield in June 2015. He arrived when Gypsy and her mother were at a doctor's appointment, and after they returned home, Dee Dee had gone to sleep. He went to their home. Gypsy let him in, and she allegedly gave him duct tape, gloves, and a knife, fully knowing what he was going to do with it. Gypsy said later that she didn't expect him to actually be able to do it. Gypsy hid in the bathroom and covered her ears so that she wouldn't hear her mother scream. Nick then stabbed Dee Dee several times in her back while she was asleep. The two ended up taking $4,000 in cash that was just laying around. It was mainly child support from Ron, and they used this money to rent a motel nearby and while they planned their next move. During this time, they were seen on a lot of security cameras on several local stores. Gypsy said that at one point she believed that the two had managed to get away with the murder. They were not trying to keep it low-key at all, they were seen everywhere. They emailed the murder weapon back to Nick's home as to not get caught with it on the bus to Wisconsin. Now, they could have gotten the death penalty under Wisconsin law, but the county prosecutor announced that he would not seek it for either Gypsy or Nick because the case was extraordinary and unusual. Gypsy was charged with second-degree murder, and she was given the minimum of 10 years. Nick, on the other hand, he was going to face more severe charges because he was the one who actually killed Dee Dee. Him and Gypsy agreed on that, and he was the one who kind of made the plot for the murder. Nick's trial was set for November 2018. Prosecutors alleged that Nick had thought about killing Dee Dee for over a year before it actually happened. Now, his lawyers pointed out that he had autism, and he said that Gypsy had formulated the crime and his client had just done what she had asked. The next day, prosecutors showed the jury text messages that Gypsy and Nick shared in the week before the murder, as well as the knife which he had used to commit the murder. In some of the texts, Nick was asking about some information about Dee Dee's sleeping habits and her room. They were actually shown the interview after his arrest of him confessing to killing Dee Dee, so it's just not looking very good for Nick here. After approximately 2 hours of deliberation, they returned with the verdict that Nick was found guilty of first-degree murder and armed criminal action. In February 2019, he was sentenced to life. Now, I know you're probably thinking, how on earth did doctors not know that they were operating on a healthy patient? There was this one doctor, he was a neurologist, and he was very suspicious of the MS diagnosis that supposedly Gypsy had, and he asked them to do MRIs and blood tests, and he ended up finding that nothing was wrong with Gypsy. He ended up asking Dee Dee, why can't Gypsy walk? She seems she should walk fine. Like, her muscles in her legs are absolutely fine. So why is she not able to walk? Dee Dee became very upset at this, and she never went to that doctor again. And because of this, he just got more suspicious, and he asked Dee Dee for some background records, and Dee Dee said that they lost everything in Katrina. So this doctor ended up making some calls to some of the old doctors just to get some tests back. This doctor ended up writing in Gypsy's records that he didn't think that she had any of the illnesses that she had, and that Dee Dee had Munchausen by proxy. I think one of the most frustrating things is that he knew something was suspicious, and he did want to say something, but his colleagues told him not to because they said that no one would believe him. The Blanchards were very respected and they were quite famous, which is just so frustrating. Like, he was so close. So close. Then a tip was given to police by an anonymous caller, and I'm guessing it's this doctor, but we don't know for sure. And the tip basically said that Gypsy wasn't as sick as she was, and that Dee Dee was mistreating her, and that Dee Dee was using different birth dates for her and her daughter. Officers then performed a wellness check, and they accepted Dee Dee's explanation that she used the misinformation to make it harder for her ex-husband to find Gypsy, and the file was closed quickly. It's so sad and frustrating for poor Gypsy. She was being taken advantage of, and Gypsy had so many different medications in her system and all these different illnesses that she didn't have, and no one was helping her. When they were performing the wellness check, Gypsy was given a bunch of drugs to make her drowsy and more sleepy, just to make her seem as sick as she was. And Dee Dee was a really good liar. She was always one step ahead of everyone, and it just didn't make sense. Like, why go through all this trouble to lie? She had the oxygen tank, she had a feeding tube. Like, it seemed like this girl, Gypsy, was very sick. Dee Dee's family in Louisiana did not mourn her death. None of them would pay for her funeral or even pick up her ashes. Her father and stepmother ultimately threw them down the toilet, which is just so messed up. Now, Gypsy was asked how she felt about her mother's death, and she said, "I'm more free in prison than living with my mom, because now I'm allowed to live like a normal woman." She would have been the perfect mom for someone who was actually sick. It's quite sad because she went from one prison, living with her mom and being abused, to another prison, literally. HBO made a documentary about this called Mommy Dead and Dearest, I think. There was also an episode in Dr. Phil where they interviewed Gypsy and her dad. Hulu also made a show called The Act about it. I think Joey King plays Gypsy. I heard that it's really good. I wanted to watch it, but I never got around to it. It is a TV show, so it's probably not the most accurate thing in the world. So yeah, this is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Tell me what you guys think down below. Personally, I don't think Gypsy should have gone as long as she did. I mean, she should have suffered some form of consequences, but I think 10 years is quite a lot considering she was abused and she was a victim. Even Nick, to be honest, I don't think he deserved life in prison, but I'm not sure. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. But yeah, tell me what you guys think down below, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!